Hello, I'm Caitlin Jenkins, the family law vlogger. Today's vlog is about issues to think about if you're thinking of moving in with your partner and so cohabiting during this particular time of COVID-19. One of the things that we're finding during this period of lockdown is that more and more clients are contemplating living together. Rather than living separately in their own properties by themselves, they're effectively choosing to form one household in one of their properties or occasionally in a new property together. So what issues should they think about before they start cohabiting? Well, the first thing to say is that living together under the law of England and Wales is not the same as being married or in a civil partnership. So don't necessarily assume that all the rights and responsibilities that come with marriage or civil partnership will also attach to cohabiting couples. The second key thing to think about is that cohabitation under English law is not necessarily defined very clearly. So some cohabitation is pretty obvious. One person moves in with the other person, or they both move in together into a new property. They set up home completely, and to all intents and purposes, they look as though they're living together as husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife. But for some cohabiting couples, particularly before lockdown, cohabitation could look a lot more flexible than that. It might not necessarily mean that they have moved in completely together and they have spent all of their nights together, but it might be that one of them has still kept a flat but doesn't really stay there at all, and in effect they have one centre of gravity. So what should cohabiting couples think about, particularly now when a cohabitation has perhaps come a bit more quickly than they necessarily would have happened, or before they've necessarily thought through all the issues? So if one of the couple remains married, even if they're going through a process of divorce, it may well have an implication on their divorce if they move in with their new partner. And so think about prior relationships and the extent to which those are already unravelled, and take some advice on whether moving in with your new partner could have an impact on the divorce. The biggest issue often to think about, particularly if the house or the flat that is going to be moved into is owned, is to think about the ownership of that property and being really, really clear about who owns the property and who has an interest in it. So if, for example, one person moves into the other person's flat, it's owned by that partner, then it's really clear that between those two people, they understand the extent to which the person moving in is acquiring any interest in that property or not. It's often easier if people are buying a property together, because you can have what's called a declaration of trust at the time that you buy the new property, which is a legal document explaining the extent of the interest that each party might have. Now that might be owned equally, or it might be that it's owned in particular percentage proportions based on the ownership or the money that you've put into the property. It's also really important that you specify how the arrangements are going to work going forward, both in relation to paying for that property, so for mortgage or other contributions towards bills, rent, renovations, etc., and in terms of day-to-day living. And so who's going to pay for what bill, who's going to pay for holidays or trips, who's going to pay for the mortgage. And so what we would often advise in that circumstance is for a cohabiting couple to have a cohabitation agreement as well as a declaration of trust if there's a property that's owned. Because in the cohabitation agreement, you can specify how you're going to operate any joint accounts, which assets you're each going to keep, the extent to which any property is going to be owned jointly or not. And so it can really set out the roadmap for the relationship and the cohabiting couple going forward, which can remove or at least certainly limit hugely the extent of any issues if unfortunately the relationship comes to an end. The other key thing to think about is the extent to which you need to cover off the situation if one of you were to die. So if you don't have wills when you start cohabiting, then it's probably wise to think about whether you should have wills to make sure that there's provision for each of the couple in the event of one of them dying while they're still unmarried but whilst they're cohabiting. That's particularly important if one or both of the couples own the home that they're living in, so you can make clear what you want to happen to that house and any other assets as well. What I haven't touched on in this vlog is the issue around cohabiting couples having children together, and that's the subject of some separate vlogs, in particular around child maintenance. Having a child together and living together can change the arrangements in terms of property arrangements depending on the circumstances, because then the courts are much more thinking about how homes can be provided for children whilst children are under 18. Those then are the key issues to think about if you're thinking of moving in with your partner or moving together with your partner during this period of COVID-19. But as always with the Family Law Vlog, this is only general information, and if you need specific advice, then please take advice from a specialist family lawyer. My details and those of the rest of the Mills & Reeve children and family team are at the end of this vlog.